emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 1325.EZ1704, certificate number 34985, the traffic jam of the century.
You drive a lot more than I do.
Is that true?
I think so. I think you drive...
We both work at home.
We do. Don't you think you drive more than me, or maybe not? Well, no, I hardly drive.
I hardly drive too.
Yeah, I mean, I drive to pick up my kid at school.
I'm leasing a car now, and I'm wishing I had gotten the lowest mileage possible because I might be driving 7,000 miles a year. I
guess that's right. I think of you driving more than me because once every 2 weeks you drive down to my house.
I feel like the bulk of my driving is to either your house or the airport.
Right.
So I'm never in my car except for a 28-minute drive.
And do you pick up either kid at school anymore? I guess the older one's in college, so he's on his own.
He's on his own. And the younger one, in theory, is because, city buses go there.
Sure.
But I feel like often Mindy ends up getting the phone call that's like, I'm late, can you drive me? Exactly.
Well, we're lucky to be able to work from home and hardly drive. But you've experienced...
Especially because we live in a city with not great transit.
Not great transit yet, although the idea, it seems, of Seattle's urban plan is to make driving so unappealing that everybody eventually votes for more buses.
That's how cities should do it, honestly.
Yeah. But I mean, right now we're in that place where driving sucks, but there aren't enough buses.
You have to do it.
Yeah, there aren't enough buses, and there's not really light rail yet certainly not to my neighborhood or yours.
Nope, no time soon.
But, in the grand scheme of things, even if we're both dead, well, here's the problem, is that the big hotshots are moving now away from self-driving cars and into helicopters, self-driving mini helicopters.
Wait, the helicopters are self-driving?
Yeah, I think so.
They're
hovercrafts.
You don't even need a pilot?
I think they're hovercrafts. Maybe no, I'd rather people not have a pilot.
What, because the one pilot that killed Kobe?
No, because the ding-dongs that are driving around Seattle in their Toyota Camrys are already a huge problem. What if they could fly?
I thought you meant in helicopters.
Well, hovercraft.
You believe in...
electric hovercraft.
So you believe in auto drivers more than in people.
When I was running for city council, I did a lot of research into self-driving cars. And that was 2015, so almost a decade ago. And even then, it seemed like they were imminent and also pretty cool, but it would require a whole rethink of city driving. Mm-hmm. The ways big cities have started doing congestion pricing to keep people out of the core, or at least make it hard on them. You'd have to, in order for self-driving cars, they're spending so much money trying to get self-driving cars to share the road with human drivers. And really, the only way it's going to work is if urban cores just eliminate all self-driving, and within the city, you have to call a car and it comes with its little robot. We would all It would do away with private car ownership.
What if you could keep driving, but you'd have to have some chip in your brain that makes you drive like a Tesla? Like
I don't want a chip in my brain.
Occasionally, mostly you're good, but occasionally you'll just plow into an ambulance because the chip told you to.
Yeah,
I think that'd be great.
That's not what I want. What I don't want is to be in a self-driving car and then have one drunk dad or one like old lady who's riding the brake the whole time. And
because if everyone's in a self-driving car, they can all be really smart and go like they can learn from each other. And
well, and also with self-driving cars, the number one. I've probably said this before. The number one cost of municipal roads is the signaling.
Right.
It's more expensive to put in traffic signaling and manage signaling than any other thing. And if all self-driving cars were communicating with each other as part of a grid, you wouldn't need signaling except for people crossing the street. But I think
people will also have been eliminated in this utopia of yours.
No. It's going to be all about people because you're going to also eliminate all the parking structures. You can make roads much narrower because cars are traveling more efficiently. We talked about a lot of this on the induced demand episode.
I forgot we had done a traffic show.
Yeah, but I watched a video the other day of a Japanese study where they built kind of a pretty small little oval. Not even an oval. I think it was a circle. And they put 22 cars in this circle and said to the 22 drivers, just maintain a 30-mile-an-hour speed. Everybody just drive 30 miles an hour, evenly spaced. And the 22 cars started out driving around this perfect circle at 30 miles an hour. And within extremely short amount of time, somebody touched their brakes. And the person behind them touched their brakes. And all of a sudden, you saw the caterpillar effect, the shock wave, where
traffic starts from nothing.
Yeah, and
the universe wants traffic. It's the natural state of the universe, entropy.
But pretty soon, people were coming to a complete stop, and then it would stretch out, and you'd race around to catch up the next person, and then a complete stop, and it just became so fast. There's just no way to have human drivers without having traffic jams.
That's a bummer because I hate traffic jams.
But the problem is, I feel like we've wasted so much energy trying to get self-driving cars to share the road with drunk dads and old ladies that a lot of the self-driving car people are just getting really disillusioned. They're already moving on to well, what about hover cars? And then the rest, then it'll just be us poors who are down.
Those people will all die in fiery crashes.
Let's hope. No, I'm not a Schadenfreude guy. I want everybody to be happy.
I don't know if I'm representative, but I wonder if there's some effect where people are getting more traffic tolerant, not because they're on their phones, which they shouldn't be.
Stop that.
But because their cars are getting good enough to have,
hi-fi stereos.
Yeah, if your car has an 8-track, you're going to be like, man, the Doobie Brothers are just getting me through this.
And you're listening to Omnibus a lot of the time when you're driving.
That helps too, but I mean the actual driving features in the car. What's it called? Dynamic adaptive cruise control?
Yeah.
Where you no longer have to think about the start and stop that you're doing because your car is kind of start and stopping for you.
Yeah, but I don't
Lane
want people
assist.
to have to do less thinking when they're in the car. That just scares me because, then you are looking at your phone because you're counting on the car to do things, and the car is not very smart.
I just find that, I don't know if nobody has done some third-party assessment of my driving acuity and alertness, but I know traffic used to just really eat at me like, why are we not moving? What is going to happen here?
Yeah.
And now that my car can kind of, adjust its own speed and stay in the lane, and all I have to do is keep kind of one hand on the wheel, and
Oh my God.
it's great.
That's terrifying. Have you and
if that person is playing Candy Crush, it's terrifying. Like if that person is actually,
Yeah, but what are you doing with all your extra time?
Well, I'm not like
Your laundry?
I'm not doing brake gas,
I see.
brake gas. It's just it turned it from kind of a physically nightmarish situation into a more of a Zen one.
It's funny how your definition of a nightmare can change as you live in a more and more affluent society.
No, like in 8,000 years ago in ancient Azerbaijan.
Well, I mean, even
people hated when their chariot went a little faster and then a little slower because another chariot was in front of them.
I'm just picturing all those like early photographs of guys coming out of coal mines, like raising up with basically sitting in a bucket through a little human-sized hole.
And are they not saying that? Do they not immediately come out of the coal mine and complain that they can't share their Netflix password with their relative or something?
It seems I am often struck by those early industrial sort of vignettes of people working 80 hours in a factory or down in a mine. I look at it and I just feel like, wasn't there any other job? I mean, it just seems like there had to have been other jobs. How would you do 60 hours in a mine and feel like, well, this is my only option. Got to feed my family.
Somebody's got to do it. That coal's not going to mine itself.
Well, I know, but it seems like, well, anyway, that maybe is speculation for another episode. I remember here in Seattle feeling like there was really a moment, a very short period of time when traffic went from bad to worse, but went from sort of bad to incredibly worse.
Are we picturing the same time frame?
Well,
or did it happen again?
Time frame.
Yeah, like 2008, maybe. Are you going earlier?
2008 is 2008 to 2010.
Does that seem close?
Yeah, because I was living in the south end of town, and my commute to my daughter's preschool went from 15 minutes to 40 minutes.
If I had to speculate, a combination of Amazon and other companies like them moving more workers into the central core of the city instead of out in Redmond where God wanted them.
Yeah, and housing prices going up, and there's always going to be that segment of the housing market that wants a 5-bedroom house and doesn't care about having a 40-minute drive. So a lot of people moving out to the far-flung suburbs to have more house for less money, and then they just climb on the roads.
Longer commutes, more people. I wonder if, we've said this before, but I think we were just raised in an artificially traffic-free Seattle because it had been built up for the population of the 1970s pre the Boeing collapse.
Right.
And it took decades to actually get back to I think Seattle hit its 1970 population again in 2000 something.
Yeah.
So we grew up in a city of abundant lanes and roads and didn't know that was not normal.
Lanes and roads and cheap houses. In the as late as the early 2000s, late 90s, I remember there were like half-acre vacant lots.
Where?
On Yesler. That you could buy for between $19,000 and $30,000.
If I had done that, I would have a skyscraper or a minimum a pot shop there today.
That's right.
And I would be the king of Seattle.
And at the time I said to my mom, hey, there's all this land and it's like within walking distance of downtown. Like you can be at the train station in 15 minutes just walking from this land. It just seems like a great investment. And she said, those lots have been vacant lots since the 60s, and they have never gone up in price. Like they cost that much in 1972, and they cost that much here in 2002.
Somebody could have got rich in the 20th century for predicting that people would want to leave the suburbs for the cities, but we couldn't. We couldn't conceive of it.
No.
We were like, well, that would be impossible.
Why would you move back to the city?
White people moving back to the city. It's just never going to happen. And yet, like, we just did it again with, and of course, people will always want to drive into downtowns to work 8 hours a day and then leave them desolate.
That's why we're building all these skyscrapers.
And all it took was one little virus.
Yeah.
And we realized, no, that's insane. Why couldn't we predict that was going to end?
Yeah, we're living in a media environment right this moment where the Amazon executive team is now saying, if you don't come back to work, you're going to get fired, right? Or in big trouble. We want you back in the office.
Even though there's really obviously nobody wants to, and there's not a lot of evidence that helps with productivity.
No, but Amazon built
that's correct.
8 really cool buildings, including some orbs. And I mean, those office towers are actually pretty attractive.
How do you like to go spend time in a little jail for 9 to 10 hours a day just because somebody else invested in the wrong real estate?
All of our desks are still made out of doors. Well, traffic jams are really lame. And the long winters toured a
several
lot.
songs about that.
The Long Winters have like 6 different songs about traffic jams.
Remember your concept album about traffic jams?
But we traveled the United States and throughout Europe on tour. And what that meant was we visited really every metropolitan area. And we typically arrived in the town after our 5 to 8 hour drive from the prior town. We usually got there in mid-afternoon.
Right at rush hour.
Yeah, because that's when load into the venue is and sound check. And depending on where we were, we've been caught in the traffic jam of pretty much every city. Right, we've been.
You're a traffic expert.
Or
jamologist.
A jamologist, right? And we jam.
And you're a jam band.
We jam Econo.
Long Winter's famously a jam band. Long guitar explorations.
And I would say that back in the 2000s, the worst traffic you ever encountered was in Boston, in Chicago, super true in Chicago,
2000s.
In Los Angeles.
I'm trying to think when the Big Dig got done in Boston.
Well, that was happening. It
could have been concurrent, right?
We watched it happen, in successive tours, and we drove through the Big Dig really soon after it opened.
After it dug,
and we were like, "This is amazing! If it doesn't just fall and kill us." We definitely remember driving through that tunnel and going, "Please don't fall on it, and please don't kill us." But then we also encountered traffic jams kind of out in the boonies. Wisconsin, we hit a big one, just not around anything because they'd reduced the lane, and it was during some period. It was usually trucks. It was full of trucks, and when they reduce the capacity of a lane to do road work or whatever, somehow they never are able to factor in that there are a couple of different rush hours for trucking, right? Like if you're on the roads at 3:00 in the morning. If you're on the highways, it's trucks. It's all trucks. And they're driving at night because they're trying to, cover that ground when there's no traffic. But you'll get caught in these. I mean, there was another one down in Arkansas one day.
Are any of them just the inexplicable kind?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I've been driving through, your I-15, an hour or two out of Barstow, and suddenly traffic.
The drugs kick in?
That's where the drugs kick in. The traffic kicks in. Suddenly there's just an hour or two of, maybe an hour. I don't know. There's just a long stop and go, and then you're like, when am I going to get to the accident? And then you crest a hill, and there's nothing there. Everyone was stopped for nothing or something that happened 3 hours ago.
Yeah, there was an accident or a cop pulled somebody over. A lot of the time, the zipper merge, which we've also talked about on the show, is a cultural thing. There are communities in the country that understand what a zipper merge is, and then there are places where they do not. And Arkansas was one example of a place where the sign said, traffic reduced to one lane in 2.5 miles. And everybody got over into the left lane. The right lane was full open.
Law-abiding citizens. I love it.
And they were super mad if you tried to skirt up. Yeah. And you're just like, wow, no, keep going, everyone.
But then there's the LA move of after the lanes have gone away and there's still one, there's still people who are trying to keep their own little lane and try to move up a couple car lengths.
Well, and it's a whole strategery of waiting for, you want to pull in front of a truck, even though that's dangerous because they have more kinetic energy. They're also slower to get going.
I mean, traffic is a zero-sum game, but generally the benefits you're getting by getting a couple car lengths ahead are not going to pay off in terms of your arrival time.
100% true. I do it all the time where I'm like, okay, there's an orange van, really noticeable. Let's see what the orange van does versus what I do.
That's my parallel universe self. It's like a sliding doors moment where I changed and became the orange van. Let's see what my avatar does over there in the left lane.
When you finally get off at the final exit, 40 miles down the road, you watch the orange van go, drive by you at the same exact moment. You're like, well, all that work I put in to getting ahead.
The multiverse of madness. The orange van was me and nothing changed.
Well, now that I'm an old, I've definitely felt the last few years, I just have stopped caring about traffic. I just get in it. I do not have adaptive braking in my car, but if you want in front of me, that's fine. If you want to. drive like a dumb
The thing about
taxi driver.
adaptive braking is it does make you keep a good following distance in front of you, which means people are constantly pulling in front of you. You kind of have to be zen about it.
Yeah, that's right. Whatever, man. If you want to get over that bridge,
I have
car
achieved
ahead.
old age just by buying a late model car.
Yeah, by buying first of all, A, electric car, B,
But gas cars have
Scandinavian electric car.
Like I think the Corolla, I think the Kia, Soul probably comes with standard adaptive cruise control now.
I loved that the first thing you said to me today was that that you read a study that said all the electric cars are they're not really solving any kind of pollution problem. They're not solving any kind of social problem.
Well, we put all this money into tax incentives to try to convert the industry, but it turns out all the EVs are just being bought by high net worth individuals who don't keep them long enough or drive them enough to actually
offset the
cost, plus all the heavy metals in the battery, and it's all terrible.
Helicopters.
Drive your old helicopter for decades. Drive the helicopter from MASH to work. Why not?
Traffic congestion has been an issue for centuries, right? That's why the Romans built such great roads. Imagine trying to march a Roman legion up some dirt path, filled with goat herds.
First dude to hit traffic must have been just so bummed.
Yeah, like what?
What? So I'm on a road, but I can't walk? Why?
We built this
because
great
there's this
road.
other guy here, but he's not walking. His mind explodes.
Imagine the traffic getting in and out of the Colosseum to watch lions eat people from Sudan.
That's probably the great thing about our culture they could understand. Like it still takes an hour to get out of the parking garage after a baseball game. They'd be like, yeah, I know those feels.
And
modernity.
And in particular, once you had a real variety of vehicles on the roads, in the 19th century in London and New York, you had trolleys, you had a lot of horse-drawn, both delivery carts and carriages. If you think of a lot of the cities, New York and London, they don't have a ton of delivery alleys where you can bring things in the back. So all of the people pulling over to the side to bring cabbages into your cabbage stand, they have to just share the roads and park right in the street where everybody's trying to get through. A lot of American cities that were built later have alleys and loading docks.
I like those cool trapdoor things. Do they still have those? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, we have them here in Seattle, the elevators that go into the sidewalks.
Yeah, those are awesome.
But I just heard a story where they're apparently, remember when they were 10 years ago tearing up First Avenue to put in a trolley?
Yeah.
And then we got a new mayor who was like, even though this is just about to open, it's too expensive, so I'm going to pave
trolley
over.
for you.
And now apparently they're going to do it again, put a trolley in on First Avenue. But that means the showbox, where all the cool rock bands play, is not going to have any bus parking for cool rock bands.
Oh, that parking lot next to it is not going to be
Well,
bus?
the parking lot next to it, they won't park buses there anymore because the guy that owns the parking lot wants them all to pay $1 million of insurance or something because they're all
I bet something
smoking
happened.
weed.
I bet something happened once in that lot.
Oh, for sure. I can personally
By
attest.
once, I mean once a weekend.
But the buses can't load in the back alley because Target built a loading dock there. So they're blocking the alley with their trucks.
Target should have stayed where it belongs, in the suburbs.
It should have.
City Target is an oxymoron.
Well, and also that Target is skanky. I don't know if you've ever been in it looking for Christmas presents.
I go there all the time.
Do you?
Well, not all the time, but
It's a little skanky. Maybe they've cleaned it up.
sometimes I just park there to get the 2 hours of free parking, and then I have to go buy whatever the $30 worth of
Cheater!
pop or something.
Cheater!
I buy the minimum worth of pop.
I buy cars that shift themselves. You're still a cheater. The first traffic jam, the first recorded all car bottleneck where nobody could move. There are a lot of traffic jams you see with early days of autos where you look at the picture and it's like, well, yeah, there are 6 horse-drawn carts, horse-drawn trolleys, motor cars, people pushing vegetable carts. Yeah, well, that's it's a traffic jam, but it's really just that cities were garbage.
If it's more than half peddlers, That doesn't count as a traffic jam.
Yeah.
You need to have more.
Right.
You need to have more horseless carriages than peddlers.
Than people selling recycled
Yeah,
pots.
if anybody's yelling about their wares, that doesn't count as a traffic jam.
The first real like car traffic jam happened, maybe not surprisingly, in Washington D.C., which now has like some of the worst traffic in the world. Right. Washington D.C., the Beltway universe of people. It's a Washington D.C. is surrounded by all suburbs, and it's really a city that everybody comes to work and then everybody goes home.
Exact same time because they've all got cushy government jobs.
That's right. But the first traffic jam happened there in 1921, the year my dad was born in Frederick, Maryland.
Was he part of the traffic jam?
A bedroom community that people actually drive to Washington, D.C., although that's a long drive.
It's a long drive.
In 1921, for the burial of the unknown soldier
from World War I
in Arlington Cemetery.
Wow. So World War I caused the traffic jam.
Eventually, yeah. A couple of years later.
It caused a lot of other stuff, too.
They're burying the unknown soldier, and at the time...
Do you think that dude that shot Franz Ferdinand was like, here comes the traffic jam.
One day, Herbert Hoover is going to be stuck in traffic. Or was it Harding? Who was president in 1921? It was Harding.
It was not Hoover.
It was Harding.
Hoover could have been. He could have been a.
He might have been in the traffic jam. Yeah, he was a young guy.
Secretary of Commerce or something.
There were only 2 bridges over the Potomac at the time.
Huh. And
everybody decided they were headed over to watch the big ceremony. And there was no provision yet for everybody in their car wanting to be in the same place at the same time. Washington was an affluent place because there were people coming from all over, and Henry Ford's cars were intentionally affordable, and there was kind of a cultural moment where all of a sudden cars had gone from a novelty to a ubiquitous appliance, but there were not yet traffic signals.
Because they're the most expensive part.
That's right.
We already learned.
Traffic signals didn't really weren't in Washington, D.C. until 1925. So traffic was still kind of directed by the same like cop standing on a podium.
Are you saying these people sat in traffic for 4 years waiting for the traffic signal to be invented?
For 40 years. They were there until World War II. And also the police did not yet understand that traffic was going to be a big part of what their job was. They were still walking their beat, swinging their billy clubs. And there weren't really parking lots yet in any substantial way.
You had to it was just the side of the road became...
Yeah. So what happened was everybody flooded across the 2 bridges into Arlington. They parked everywhere they could, up on the grass, in every little available space. And then there was nowhere for the cars to go. And so the traffic backed up until it was impacted and then could go nowhere.
And gridlock, we say.
It was gridlock. And weirdly, one of the things that affected it was in 1921, there were still quite a few electric cars. This was at a time when there was, as now, a big sort of electric car lobby. And the problem was that the electric cars, once they stalled, it was like sharks have to keep moving. Once the electric cars stalled, they were not able to get them started again. And the chief of police had only dedicated 3 officers to direct traffic. The idea being, they come across and you send them this way or send them that way. No way of knowing that they would all arrive. And so the traffic actually, the president of the United States at the time, who we've established was Harding.
Very likely Warren G. Harding. No way to prove it wasn't.
Also was stuck in traffic. And the Secret Service was panicking because this was they understood that if they could get to Franz Ferdinand, they could also get to Harding. And so it immediately, although people had been talking about a 3rd bridge over the Potomac, also a Long Winters concept album.
How many songs did you write about a hypothetical third bridge over the Potomac?
It ended up being part of the big push that resulted in Memorial Bridge being built over the Potomac, and they built it. It was at the time much wider than typical bridge construction because, they're trying to close the barn door after the horse was gone.
Oh, Memorial Bridge is the one I'm picturing.
Yeah.
The one right there by the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, and they built that.
I guess it makes sense. It's going to Arlington.
It goes from the Lincoln Memorial to Robert E. Lee's house, which then is now the center of, not his house, but the Lee plantation.
A little ironic that most people would probably choose one or the other. Either Lincoln or Robert E. Lee.
But people like to go between them because both sides can.
Yeah, you got to teach both sides of the Potomac.
Washington, D.C. now has over 80,000 cars a day entering the city.
Do you think there was an induced demand thing? They built this bridge and it didn't do anything?
I think it was that they built the Department of Homeland Security, upon whom we blame, upon whose lofty shoulders we put all modern problems. It was Homeland Security all along.
Even though it didn't exist.
Until 2012 or whatever that was. Is that right? No, 2002.
Never forget.
I've already forgotten.
Never forget which decade 9/11 happened. Yeah, plus or minus 10 years. You got it.
And there were, there was there were a couple of prior instances. In 1913 in New York City, there was like a weird, what is it called when somebody goes on the internet and says everybody go dance the jig?
Mob?
A flash mob, a weird flash mob in around Columbia University, because no less than Henri Bergson had arrived to give a series of lectures.
Do you think that was the first and last philosopher-caused traffic jam?
Yeah, everybody talk about the difference in time. In 1913, that was enough of a cause, enough of a media spectacle that on a section of Broadway there was suddenly something no one had ever seen before.
Henri Bergson.
Look at all that, and also look at all these people. They're all in one place at once. But it didn't quite qualify as the Mondo.
Today, a French philosopher is really hoping to have 10 people at his reading.
Yeah.
At his Barnes & Noble
92nd Street Y. Or the Barnes & Noble, right. When we think of modern traffic jams, one of the first big ones was Woodstock. All the people, all the young teeny boppers and the nascent hippies
got out of their parents' cars.
That's right.
They all
tried to get up to Woodstock. Nobody predicted it. Famously, Woodstock didn't even have porta potties, let alone any way to get all of these tens of thousands of teenagers who were trying to get up this 2-lane country road to Woodstock. And so those are some of the photographs of that traffic jam from the helicopters really made an impact in terms of a mega traffic jam. There were plenty of traffic jams by the 50s and 60s.
In 1969, we hadn't yet gotten to our modern technology level, which is smarter. You get all the annoying people to the concert, and then you don't let them out. This is where we are at Burning Man.
Right.
Today.
Right. Like it rains and...
Let them all get there and then trap them there. That's what they should have done at Woodstock.
What they should have done is, trap them there and then, I don't know.
Hunted them for sport?
Yeah.
Who's hunting?
I hadn't even considered that.
Who are the hunters here? Like Country Joe and the Fish, or just like?
Well, no, that's the thing. All the rich people who might hunt humans for sport are at the event. So you got to get the ultra billionaires who wouldn't even go to Burning Man.
I think it's the bands. The bands should be allowed to hunt the spectators.
The bands are all peaceniks and they're all high on drugs.
Yeah, they're probably not that peaceful.
Well, this is part of the induced demand of building the interstates in the first place. I remember being stuck in traffic jams in the 70s with my mom on I-5 on our way to Shoreline. But, it was a 2-lane highway, hadn't yet been induced demanded up to 4 lanes.
This is I-5, not
I-5.
Not 99.
And this was an era when big American cars all overheated. So you'd see all these cars over on the side of the road with steam coming out.
The guy under the hood waving the steam away. I love that.
Just trying to cool the car down.
times.
But no, we were stuck in, and this was the dawn of carpooling as a way of trying to reduce congestion. And then it was shortly after their carpool lanes.
Yeah, did we have HOV lanes early here? Because we had them in the late 70s here, and I don't know. Maybe just if I'd grown up somewhere else, maybe I would have seen them there too.
No, it was a a left coast hippie sort of this because we
had the smart express lanes that would change direction with traffic.
That's right, and that was built into the bridges across the. So there was a lot of awareness by then that traffic congestion was going to be a factor in cities, and white flight to the suburbs.
Yeah.
But the idea of a mega traffic jam where people were stuck overnight, or what would have been a half-hour drive took them 8 hours. This was a thing that, Woodstock really shocked the world, that you're going to miss the concert. You're sitting.
You could get stranded. You could run out of food.
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere.
And no way around. There was no side route. And then that became like a kind of a media event. In 1980, there was what for a long time was the greatest traffic jam, which was the road from Lyon to Paris. And it happened in February. A lot of people returning from their Swiss ski vacations and returning from their overwinter somewhere in the south.
Do the French get a month off in February as well?
I can only imagine. A wine drinking month. Everybody was returning to Paris, and like mid-February, and it was massive traffic congestion that actually spanned over 100 miles of the road from Lyon to Paris. And at the time, and that's a 450-mile drive, so one you could do in, 5 hours?
Yeah.
And suddenly people were trapped. There was nowhere for them to go. And those images and the idea that, I think, again, shocking, and particularly you think of in Europe,
not car culture.
Yeah, but there was no way to get from the Alps to Paris by train, maybe. Well, nobody prepared for it. They were all excited to be in their Citroëns,
their Opels,
with their pneumatic suspensions, and so for quite a while that was the big shocker, the 1980 traffic jam in France. That was kind of surpassed by a traffic jam that happened when the Berlin Wall opened. At first, so the Berlin Wall opened in November. What was it? I was there. What the hell am I talking about?
When it came down? I want to say November. November
7th, 9th? Well, I was really baked. So there was a traffic jam then of just people like, wow, holy cow, going both directions. But it really wasn't until Easter of the following year that everybody on both sides now it had become less of a big deal that the wall was transitable, and everybody wanted to go visit their relatives on the other side for Easter.
Because they probably hadn't been able to do so easily
forever
and ever.
Or, they'd seen them now a few times. They'd gone to visit, but now it was Easter. And let's go see our cousins.
I wonder if Easter is their Thanksgiving, the day of the default family get-together for the big meal,
Yeah, maybe. Right, they don't have a Thanksgiving there because
they're ungrateful.
Yeah, that's right.
They get everything from the government.
And so that was a big cluster that people were actually stuck in traffic for 48 hours.
Wow.
Because once you're in your car and stuck, if you're not willing to just pull the parking brake up, get out, and walk home, you're
What are you going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and
I'm imagining it all still siphoning down to that one famously down section of the wall. Like all these roads are meeting at that one sledgehammered.
they hadn't even opened the Brandenburg Gate. It was just that one little spot.
A lot of backup. We're seeing a lot of backup on the S curves heading into Checkpoint Charlie. Use alternate routes.
And then there were I don't know. When was the last time you were in Houston? We talk about Houston and Dallas more than you would think.
Is that true?
Show.
I was in Houston like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, for a speaking engagement?
Just love it there in August.
It's really nice in hurricane season, too.
It's true. Dylan and I were going to L.A. and we were like, let's see a baseball stadium we've never been. And we looked at flights and the Astros were at home. So we saw one of the worst baseball stadiums.
And who were the Astros playing?
Angels, I want to say.
And in an Astros versus Angels game, who do you root for? Angels?
I mean,
It's tough to root for the Angels.
Mariners fans kind of hate the Astros now because they're in our division and have 2 World Series, at least one of them obtained through cheatingness.
Sure.
So the Mariners now have a tradition of just booing. I went to the All-Star game and we booed the Astros mascot. I was like, that's a bummer. That's probably not even the same guy.
I'm against booing in baseball.
Me too.
There's no booing in baseball.
But Dylan heckles.
Yeah.
Dylan will be like, you said something racist on SportsCenter or something. And I'm like, well, that's he's got a lot of inside knowledge about this Royals outfielder.
See, I love that because I sometimes am, like with a friend, able to sit kind of down by the dugout near the first base. And there's occasionally somebody in the stands there that heckles really well, like super smart.
And they can hear you.
Oh, they
if you're
sure do.
If you're targeting somebody, they hear you.
And the heckles are good enough that you'll watch the base runner on first turn. You see the insults land because they're really smart. They know their stuff and they get and they're funny. And everybody in the stands, they're all it's bad. It's a burn culture, but it's so funny.
But I don't remember my Houston trip having bad traffic. I guess we came in on a weekend.
Well, so Texas is very sensitive about people worldwide mocking their roads because if you've been on Texas freeways, you know that they are very wide, and it's partly because
I think this was the Induced Demand show, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Was it Houston or Dallas?
The access roads, there are spurs to the freeways, but the spurs are also multiple lanes.
Yeah.
So
if you count those, sometimes it's 14 lanes wide.
Yeah, the Katy freeway in Houston has 26 lanes at one point.
I think Katy might have been the ground zero of our Induced Demand show.
Induced Demand, yeah. But in 2005, in the run-up to Hurricane Rita, there was a evacuate the city order, and everybody got out on the highway, and the highways just slammed shut. And luckily...
isn't Houston like the 4th biggest city in America, quietly or something? It's huge.
It's huge. And fortunately, although Rita dumped a bunch of water on Houston, there wasn't a situation where tens of thousands of people were stuck in traffic and then a hurricane hit them.
Yeah.
That would have been kind of a bummer. But it was an example of, the interstates were built to evacuate the cities in the event of a nuclear war.
In part, yeah.
And if you saw this Houston massive freeway leading out of town and nobody moving anywhere, it gave you pause.
It turns out you can't evacuate a city by single family car.
Yeah. And what you would end up being is immolated in your car, unable to go any direction, which I guess is if you're going to go.
Maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, just vaporized. And then the future civilizations will find all these
this is why the
vine-covered mounds, and they'll dig down. Oh, my God.
Station wagon. These billionaires that's why they have helicopters. They want to stay ahead of the panicked mobs when the Mad Max starts.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. The cities now that have the worst traffic. Of course, there's a whole subculture of people rating bad traffic. What do you think the worst traffic in the world is?
Is it like Delhi or some city in China I've never heard of?
You would think, although I think that they don't even. It's hard to. Well, Delhi, as you said, if some portion of your traffic is
car ownership per capita is a lot lower there.
if it's merchants, I mean, in Delhi, how much of it is water buffalo?
Is it just us? Is it like Atlanta or
No,
San
it's
Francisco or
London.
something? I guess that makes
London,
sense.
not built for cars, a lot of cars. The congestion pricing, when we started to encounter congestion pricing on tour, what we do is just drive around it, circle around the outside of the city, which is not helping traffic. No. And then as soon as congestion pricing was over, we turn and zip into wherever the venue was.
Well, most of London is just full of Saudi and Russian Bentleys and Maseratis. They don't care what congestion pricing costs.
No.
They'll pay $1,000 a day to park in Kensington.
That's right. And then second after London, Chicago.
Huh.
Paris, Boston, New York. The first city that isn't one of these sort of big
Great global
American
cities.
or European cities is Bogota.
Bogota, Colombia?
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Bogota. What have I been saying Bogota all these years? I have.
Like Abe Bogota?
I mean, I hear.
It actually took me a second to get to what you were saying. I was like, "Where's? Oh, right."
I guess I've also heard Bogota, and maybe I just thought they were two different places.
Two different cities?
Well,
which one has the worst traffic?
Bogota. I like Bogota. But the topic of our story today,
finally,
here at 44 minutes into the show, is what is in some ways widely regarded as the traffic jam of the century. And we're only 23 years into the century.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Which century is it?
It's this century, okay. our modern century. Since this traffic jam was declared the traffic jam of the century, there have been several competing traffic jams.
Seems too early. You don't want to say that the trial of the century is some architect killing a showgirl at Madison Square Garden because, you just wait 30 years, you're going to have,
the head of Richard Nixon
Nuremberg
in a
or
jar.
an OJ or exactly.
But it did happen in China on August 14th, 2010. As we record this, a short 13 years ago, there was a terrible, I guess if you were there, a terrible occurrence. For those of us that looked at it at one remove or two removes, just seemed hilarious.
Wow. For those of us with no empathy.
But it was kind of a perfect storm. What was happening in China at the time was that in Inner Mongolia, a very rich coal field had been discovered, and the coal was being extracted at heroic rates, and that coal was being transported primarily by truck because Inner Mongolia was underserved by rail.
Railroads.
And it was a time in the middle of summer when traffic construction or road construction is kind of at its peak.
In Seattle, all the roads get worked on in the same 3-week stretch because
That's right.
it'll probably rain any other time.
That's right. And that's the problem in Alaska too. Like you can't work on the roads for 9 months and then you have to get it all done. And we all know this, but also you get those moments where you're like, really? It's the Blue Angels are here. It's a baseball tournament and you've got the roads all turned up. Don't you have a calendar in your office?
That is what happens.
The roads, and this was also a period, 2010, where China was just in a real period of growth. There was a burst of new private ownership of cars. And so as a result of that, the roads were already like way over capacity in general. And it was during this period that the roads into Beijing were being worked on. And so capacity was, over the course of this week, reduced by 50%.
Oh.
And there was also sort of, not congestion pricing, but there were rules on when you could enter Beijing.
Time of day.
Yeah, time of day, and trucks sort of limited in their... But all of this coal was moving around.
And Taylor Swift was playing.
Taylor Swift was playing.
No.
And so on two highways, the Chinese National Highway and the Beijing to Tibet Expressway,
The BTE.
traffic came to a complete halt. It couldn't get through these bottlenecks. There were all these coal trucks that no one had planned for that were all kind of trying to get around inspection stations because a lot of the trucks were unlicensed, and so there were other routes, but those had places where the trucks would have to go through a weigh station or some kind of, and so these two roads were like a way that the truck drivers could kind of avoid the cops. And
I love this Chinese version of Smokey and the Bandit.
that's exactly, yeah, it's right. It's the
Trying to get Coors to Beijing.
it's the Cannonball Run, except everyone comes to a complete stop. And
was it like a gridlock scenario where like the people trying to get from here to here were stopping the people trying to go there to there, so it's like no escape.
It expanded outward.
You can't even wait for it to
That's
dissipate
right.
because it won't.
And so traffic was backed up for 62 to 100 miles in every direction and couldn't move at all. In an entire day, you were moving sort of a half a mile maybe.
And this is provocative because there's no natural disaster. It's not like snow has stopped them or anything.
Right.
It's just other cars like you are stopping you. You are stopping you. You're the problem.
And they didn't, at first, they did not say, maybe this is the wrong time to close half the lanes down for a thing where we tear up the roads. Maybe we should adjust this. And so traffic remained, there were cars that remained in the traffic jam, stuck in the traffic jam for over 5 days. Local residents figured out how to make
Get food and water.
or
sell food and water.
Sell food and water. So people, would load up their bicycles with water and noodle soup and drive through, selling everything at massively inflated prices.
Because at some point, putting that many people in an unexpected place for that long turns into a humanitarian thing. It's
right.
You get Fire Festival.
Right. And a lot of people were saying that being stuck in this traffic jam was more expensive than going out to fancy dinners every night because they were just buying top ramen and water from these sellers gouging them. Eventually, the local authorities started to relax their restrictions on trucks entering Beijing. Right, it was, and they cleared up some of the construction and traffic got moving. But this traffic jam lasted for 12 days. 12 days in every direction. Traffic was completely gridlocked, barely inching forward.
So some people were there for over a week.
Over a week. So this particular traffic jam in 2010 was rivaled by, at the time, traffic jams in Sao Paulo, Brazil, which had also become a kind of city with a lot of new affluence, a lot of congested streets.
So car ownership outpaces infrastructure investment.
Right. And so Sao Paulo was kind of competing for worst traffic jam status for a long time.
Is that a coveted thing?
Well, no.
Our country's like, it could be us.
I think at one point, if you counted all the roads in Sao Paulo that were like blocked, it was over 500 miles of streets where nobody could move because the whole city just stops.
It's just a web.
There's no one's moving anywhere. And then in 2014, a few short years later, Sao Paulo had a gridlock traffic jam that stretched over 200 miles. As a result of that, and this was, there are lots of, if you go online and say worst traffic jam, a lot of places will say that Houston, when all 26 lanes of the Katy are blocked, they'll say that Houston has the largest highway in the world and the worst traffic jam. But a lot of times they'll actually be showing, in the internet article, they'll have a picture of Houston and then 5 pictures of traffic jams in China that just look like...
It's just traffic stock footage now?
Yeah, stock footage.
It's China's main export.
But it's hard. Sao Paulo has a very distinctive look, right? You can't... It's not...
I'm gonna fall for that.
It's not that there's 26 lanes of traffic, right? It's like you say, infrastructure not equipped. What's happened there is that private ownership of helicopters has skyrocketed, literally. And Sao Paulo now has the greatest number of urban helicopters per capita of anywhere in the world.
Because it's the only way to get to work.
Well, so billionaires and politicians and hotshots are just using it to run errands because you're stuck in traffic all day otherwise. Including now some delivery companies are saying it's cheaper for us to deliver with helicopters.
I'm just assuming that everybody's going to switch to helicopters until the helicopter crashes and traffic jams start.
Yeah, I mean, by comparison, there are approximately 160 helicopter flights in New York City per day. And that gets, people are yelling at the helicopter noise and the kind of like rich people flying above the city. In Sao Paulo, there are 400 helicopter flights a day. And any attempt to kind of restrict helicopter flights gets kind of gutted by the politicians.
Met by enough payoffs.
Yeah, that are also using helicopters to fly every day. That equates to over 700 helicopter flights across the city because a lot of those helicopters are flying to work and flying home or flying to the Gucci store and flying home.
That can't be, carbon footprint wise, that can't be the way to go. I'm no expert here, but.
I think no. I think not until battery-powered hover cars is that going to be a net gain.
All politicians should be forced to use public transit if they're going to vote.
Yeah, there are over 2,000 private helicopters in Brazil. I think all politicians should have to use public transit. Just full stop. That should be the first thing that we do with elected officials.
You should not be allowed in a car. They should all be microchipped like puppies so that if they try to get in a car, the little thing on their leg, their ankle bracelet says, nope, the bus for you.
When I was running for office here, the local like radical socialist candidate or city council person, Shama Sawant, was asked at an event I was, one of those panels where all the city council people, and she's the one that's always, really rattling her saber about all the progressive causes. Mm-hmm. Someone surprised her with, when's the last time you took a bus? And there was a very uncomfortable moment in the room and she lives on Capitol Hill, pretty easy to get downtown.
Area.
Busable and really walkable to work. And it got pretty quiet in the room as she struggled to, and ultimately recalled no time she'd ever been on a bus.
The follow-up is, how much did it cost?
Driven to work. So there's seems like no end to global traffic jams. And I think calling the Chinese national, 12-day long traffic jam, the traffic jam of the century, is only it seems like a trophy that's going to get passed around like the Stanley Cup.
Too early. Like that'll be the shortest traffic jam by the end of the century.
Yeah, even in China, just a couple of years later in 2012, there's a toll plaza going into Beijing that actually expands to be 50 lanes across. And there was for Golden Week, which was the week that celebrates the Communist Revolution, the government had maybe ill-advisedly given everybody the week off, or just said like, go out and we're going to make it. There was some sort of government restriction lifted.
Everybody can travel now.
And as this toll plaza as you make it through the toll plaza, the 50 lanes go down to 20.
Yeah. Only
20 lanes. And that produced a massive traffic jam that gets used a lot in the kind of photograph collages of like, and often blamed on Houston.
There are photographers who are getting dispatched just for traffic jams. Like, oh boy.
Yeah, in helicopters.
I got to get traffic photos.
That's the other thing. A lot of traffic jam photos in helicopters. This is an example, though, of one of the, that we see a lot on Omnibus, where when you start to read deeply into the culture of the sort of waggish magazine or newspaper article talking about traffic jams, they all end up kind of referring back to one or two sources for each one of these traffic jams. There's one newspaper article that gets written in its moment, and then then all the subsequent statistics, in fact, a lot of the turns of phrase just get plagiarized throughout, global media.
Because journalism is dying and there's only one account of some things now?
Yeah. So there are 40 articles and think pieces about the significance of this Chinese national highway traffic jam. But reading them, you find the exact same little, sort of vague statistic followed, and I'm recapitulating them here.
Part of the problem.
Because at the time, 2010, the Western journalists who were on site, who were dispatched to write a hilarious article about this 12-day traffic jam, there were only a couple, and they were only able to interview the 5 people selling noodles.
It seems like there might be some xenophobia here where, like, if those people were stuck in traffic jam for 40 minutes, they would be flipping out. But if you can observe people from another culture in traffic for 12 days, look at the silly Chinese infrastructure problems.
Well, and that's the thing. You read articles on global traffic jams written from the United States. They're all about Sao Paulo and Brazil, or I'm sorry, Sao Paulo and China. But everywhere else in the world, they're all about Houston, Dallas, Boston, and Chicago.
That's nice that we can provide something.
Yeah.
Well, I'll never complain about being sitting in traffic in Centralia for 20 minutes again. Like, I'll feel like I got off easy.
I'm still going to complain about being stuck in Olympia trying to get through Joint Base Lewis McChord because all those people from the striker brigades go back where they came from.
Only one road through Lewis McChord. No shortcuts. And that concludes the traffic jam of the century. Entry 1325.EZ1704. Certificate number 34985 in the omnibus. Speaking of traffic, internet traffic will drive you to the omnibus's various social media incarnations at Omnibus Project, at Ken Jennings or at John Roderick to some degree. John's on Instagram a lot. You're the only person using Instagram for long form prose.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I do that, right? Kind of like I used to do on Twitter, where I wrote 140 character tweets. I write up to the character limit,
but it's 26,000 and something.
Yeah, so I'm writing multiple paragraph articles on Instagram, and
I'm looking at a very large daddy long legs behind you. I'm sorry, I don't want to distract you.
Well, we know that daddy long legs are good spiders.
That's right.
As all spiders are good spiders.
I don't like when they call them harvesters. You know the British call them harvesters or something?
Yeah, that's a little bit
it makes them seem like they're alien. Oh,
yeah.
Harvestmen. That's what it is.
Harvestman, even worse.
I know. Like the Harvestman is like the Babadook. It's a cryptid.
I know. The Harvestman coming for all of your mosquito larvae. But yeah, so I'm on there and I'm writing long form, and I know that people are just scrolling looking for cat videos, and that they're not going to sit and read my essay on how Seattle malls in the 1970s all had candy shops. But that's what I'm doing over there. So go over to Instagram and see.
If you're interested in when the Farrells at Northgate closed, John will tell you on his Instagram.
I finished the pig's trough at Farrell's.
You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. In fact, please do, or we can't construct addenda shows. Those addenda shows are used for our Patreon subscribers. If you're one of the many casual Omnibus listeners who is missing out on a core part of the experience, make a small donation, become a supporter at patreon.com/omnibusproject and unlock a world of adventure and excitement. You can send physical items to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155. Lois, I guess for years, wanted to suggest I guess she would say the Appalachian blue people, the blue fugates of Appalachia.
But then we did it.
Never got around to it, but you heard me anyway. It's true. We actually are surveilling many listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Read your terms and conditions. We all the stuff we know about your sex lives, we can say right now. Sorry. And she sent us the book in which she learned about the blue fugates, The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, a New York Times best-selling novel from sometime in the last decade. Oh, newer than I thought, 2019.
I ran into my friend Apple at the Thing Festival. Apple, who pronounces her name Appalachia. Apple from Tennessee.
Wait, is it short for Appalachia?
Her parents named her Appalachia.
Wow.
And so she goes by Apple.
Is she blue?
She is not blue. I mean, she sometimes gets sad. But not that often.
Apple should be red and green, but not blue. That's what I'd say to her if I saw her and she was sad. Apple should be red and green, but never blue.
I mean,
that would cheer her right up.
We could call her Appla, but what a weird name that would be.
Appalachia. So her appellation is Appalachian, but spelled two ways.
Oh, her appellation is
Appalachia. See what I'm going for there?
Yeah, I do.
They think your mom might, Lois thinks your mom might enjoy this book.
I bet she would.
Your mom sent me a very nice email, by the way, that she read my last book and she wanted to do a little book report on it. She told me what she enjoyed.
Yeah.
It was lovely. I should reply.
For a few days, she walked around the house wanting to talk to me about your book. And I was like, look, man, I don't want to sit and hear your thoughts on Ken Jennings' book. It just makes
the last thing I want.
Reminds me that I haven't written a weird book about maps.
Well, and that's the main reason she's telling you.
Yeah.
Like the subtext of it is like, why didn't you write a book?
You know,
John.
My friend went to medical school. My friend's son went to medical school. No, she really did like the book.
In fact, Lois says she's going to listen to the audio version of 100 Places to See After You Die in her next road trip. Thank you so much, Lois. She mentions we did not discuss racist attitudes toward the blue people. Like they were considered, like that was to be colored. So they were treated with the same laws that were used to discriminate against black people, which I don't think I knew.
Interesting. Well, there's a lot of...
Must be in the novel.
There's a lot of Appalachian feelings culturally of having been persecuted and still persecuted by everyone.
Despite being white, you mean?
Yeah, because they're the epicenter of hillbilly culture, which is derided by every single person in America, regardless of their race or creed.
It's the one thing that unites Americans.
Yes.
Liking a good hillbilly joke.
Well, and it's one thing that unites the Scots-Irish, which is feeling at war with every other person.
Yeah, they enjoy it, I bet. Look for the Futurelings on Facebook and elsewhere. And that's about it. Really, I'm serious about the Patreon. You're probably not that ethically advanced a person if you don't support a podcast you listen to every week.
You're trying to not just shame people into subscribing to our Patreon, but actually like insult them into it.
Yeah, really. They should know that I don't respect them right now.
Oh, but we're still surveilling you. Ken is watching you and doesn't respect you.
Look, we need that data. We need the big data about your sex life. But we also need you to support our Patreon.
Futurelings from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we wish you many goods and cheese and hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the oven.